every naval planner on the other side of the Pacific who has spent a decade studying which launch system the American fleet would standardize on. 3 things I am going to prove to you today. 1, why this is a procurement reversal and not a demolition order. 2, why the 2-month deadline matters more than the technology. 3, what to watch before anyone touches a single deck plate. I am Professor Jiang. On this channel, we do not do panic, and we do not do cheerleading. We follow the logic of power. I am not speaking for any government, any navy, any shipbuilder, or any newsroom. This is independent analysis. And everything I put in front of you today traces back to reporting you can go read yourself. I have taken the framework I use for exactly this kind of story, the way a single procurement decision quietly rewrites a 20-year military balance, and I put all of it into an ebook called The Next Global Shift. It walks through how industrial capacity, not rhetoric, decides who actually wins the next decade. If today's episode is useful to you, that book is the long version. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. Now let us do the work. Here is the timeline. Clean. On Thursday, August 13th, 2026, President Donald Trump directed the United States Navy to produce a plan for returning to steam-powered aircraft launch, catapults, on future Ford-class aircraft carriers. The deadline attached to that direction was 2 months, not 2 years. 2 months to produce a plan. Read that sentence slowly, because almost every headline you saw compressed it into something it does not say. The president did not order steam catapults installed. He ordered the Navy to come back with a plan for doing it. Those are different objects. One is a piece of construction, the other is a document. Today, only the document has been ordered. The Associated Press reported the story on August 13th, and the Associated Press carried the distinction that I consider the single most load-bearing fact in this entire episode. The first 3 Ford-class carriers, the ships already built or currently being completed, are reported to be unaffected. The prospective design change is placed at CVN 81, the future USS Doris Miller, and the hulls that come after her. Hold on to that, because it changes the story from a demolition story into a design story. Reuters reported the same directive on the same day, framing it as an order to move the Navy's next carriers back towards steam. The Guardian reported it on August 13th as well. The Wall Street Journal also covered it on the 13th. And the journal built its framing around cost, reporting that restoring the older launch technology would carry a very substantial price tag. I am going to be disciplined here and attribute every cost and schedule characterization to the outlet that published it. I am not going to invent a dollar total for you, and you should be suspicious of anyone who hands you one with confidence today. Now let me draw 3 lines that most of the coverage blurred, because if you do not have these 3 lines, you will misread everything that follows. Line 1, a catapult is not a resting gear. The catapult does one job, which is to take an aircraft from a standstill to flying speed inside the length of a deck. A resting gear does the opposite job, which is stopping an aircraft on recovery. They are separate systems with separate engineering. A directive about launch is not automatically a directive about recovery. Line 2, a catapult is not propulsion. Ford-class carriers are nuclear-powered ships. The reactors are not the subject of this directive. Changing how aircraft are thrown off the bow is not the same thing as changing what drives the ship through the water. Anybody telling you the Navy has been ordered to rip out the heart of the ship is not reading the reporting. Line 3, steam and electromagnetic launch are 2 different ways to solve the same physics problem. One uses steam pressure routed from the ship's plant. The other uses electrical energy and a linear motor. The Ford class was designed around the electromagnetic approach, which means the ship's internal architecture, its power distribution, its spaces, and its plumbing were laid out to support that choice. This matters enormously, and I will come back to it. So what actually exists right now, as of this recording? A presidential direction, a 2-month clock, a set of news reports from 4 major outlets published on August 13th, and a distinction preserved by the Associated Press between 3 ships that are reported to be untouched and a future hull where the change would actually land. What does not exist right now? A completed Navy plan, a published engineering baseline, a stated schedule impact, a funded contract modification, a shipyard change order. There is one more piece of the paper trail worth naming: The White House maintains a public index of presidential actions, including presidential memoranda. That index is where a formal instrument, if one is issued in this form, would surface in writing. I am not going to tell you today what is or is not posted there. I am telling you that this is one of the places where words either become documents or quietly stop being anything at all. That is the entire factual base. Everything past this point is my analysis, and I will label it as analysis. Which brings me to the question I could not put down all day. Why this system and why this deadline? Not why steam. That is the shallow version. Ask the sharper version. Why would an administration reach into a warship class that is already 3 hulls deep and reverse the launch technology on the 4th? At exactly the moment when the most serious naval competitor on the planet is investing enormous effort into mastering the very technology being reversed. And why attach 2 months to it? 2 months is too short to finish a redesign and too long to be a press release. 2 months is a specific, deliberate, bureaucratic interval. And intervals like that are chosen for a reason. Answer those 2 questions together and the whole story opens. I want to give you a frame for this, because without one, you will spend the next month watching the wrong screen. I am calling it the carrier reversal. The carrier reversal is this. An administration can change the technology it wants in the next carrier far faster than a shipyard can redesign, reprice, test, qualify, and deliver that carrier. Political time and industrial time run at completely different speeds, and the gap between them is not a bug in the system. It is where the actual signaling happens. Let me unpack the carrier reversal in 5 stages. Stage 1, the clock asymmetry. A directive is a sentence. A carrier is a decade. That is the whole asymmetry in 9 words. A president can change the stated technical requirement for a future warship in an afternoon. The object that requirement describes, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, is a construction program measured in years of steel, welding, systems integration, testing, and crew certification, which means a reversal is fully real at the level of intent on day 1, largely real at the level of paper within months, and only real at the level of steel much, much later, if ever. So when you hear that a carrier's launch system is being reversed, your first question should not be, is steam better than electromagnetic? Your first question should be, at which layer has this actually happened? Today, it has happened at exactly 1 layer. Intent. That is not nothing. Intent is where every procurement change in history begins. But it is also the cheapest and most reversible layer there is. The 2-month deadline is the tell. 2 months is not a construction schedule. 2 months is a staff work schedule. It is the amount of time you give an organization when you want a serious internal answer with numbers attached that can then be used as leverage in a budget fight. The deadline tells you the immediate deliverable is a document, and documents are instruments of persuasion before they are instruments of engineering. Stage 2, the firewall. This is where the Associated Press distinction becomes the most valuable sentence in the entire news cycle. The first 3 Ford-class ships, the ones already built or being completed, are reported to be unaffected. The prospective change is placed at CVN 81, the future USS Doris Miller, and later hulls. That single distinction converts the story from catastrophe into procurement. And I want you to understand why that is such an enormous difference. Changing a system on a ship that is already floating means tearing into a completed, integrated, tested warship. Changing a system on a ship that exists mainly as drawings, contracts, and long lead material means editing a design. The first is surgery on a living body. The second is redlining a blueprint. They are not remotely the same act, they do not cost the same, and they do not carry the same risk. So the fight, as reported, is happening in the design phase. That is the phase where changes are cheapest, where they are most reversible, and critically, where they are least visible to the public. Nobody films a redesign. There is no dramatic footage of a specification being amended, which is exactly why the loudest version of the story, the tearing out version, spreads faster than the accurate version. And notice what the firewall protects. The carriers that would actually be available in a near-term crisis are the ones reported to be untouched. Whatever this directive does, on the reporting we have, it does not subtract capability from the fleet that exists now. It edits the fleet that does not exist yet. Stage 3. What makes a plan real? 2 months from August 13th puts the Navy's answer in the middle of October. When that plan surfaces, in whatever form it surfaces, I want you armed with 3 tests. These 3 tests are the difference between a real reversal and an expensive press cycle. Test 1. Is there a feasible engineering baseline? The Ford class was designed around an electrical launch architecture. Its internal layout, its power generation and distribution, and its spaces reflect that choice. Reintroducing a steam-based launch system into a hull designed the other way is not a matter of swapping one box for another. It raises immediate questions about where the steam comes from, how it is routed, what volume it takes up, and what gets displaced to make room. A real plan answers those questions with specificity. A plan that gestures at feasibility without an integration baseline is not a plan. Test 2. Is there a stated schedule impact? Every design change on a warship that is already under contract has a delivery consequence. Maybe it is small, maybe it is severe, but it is never zero, and a serious plan names it. If the document arrives with no honest schedule delta attached, that absence is itself the finding. Test 3. Is there a funded contracting path? This is the one almost nobody watches, and it is the one that decides everything. A technology change on a ship under construction has to become a contract modification with a shipbuilder, backed by appropriated money with congressional language that survives a budget cycle. Until there is a funded path, a reversal is a preference. Once there is a funded path, a reversal is a fact. That transition from preference to funded fact is the only moment that genuinely changes the naval balance. Run those 3 tests in October, and you will know more than every hot take published in August. Stage 4. Reading the reversal from the other side. Here I want to be precise, because this is analysis and I will not pretend otherwise. I am not asserting that Beijing caused this decision. Nothing in the reporting supports that, and I am not going to manufacture a causal chain for the sake of a cleaner story. What I am saying is that a decision like this gets read, and I can reason about how a professional would read it. A foreign naval planner working on a 15 to 20 year horizon does not primarily care whether American aircraft leave the deck on steam or on electricity. Both work, both have been made to work. What that planner cares about is predictability, because every long-range program they build is a bet on what the other side's fleet will look like when their own ships arrive. The carrier reversal degrades that predictability. It tells an outside observer that the American launch standard for future hulls is politically contestable, that it can be reopened by a directive, and that the reopening can happen faster than any rival can adjust its own shipbuilding. That forces a hedge. Hedging is expensive. Making your competitor hedge is, in the coldest sense, a return on the cost of your own indecision. Now, the honest counterweight, because I promised you the logic of power and not cheerleading. Contestability cuts both ways. The same reversal can be read as evidence of unresolved problems inside a flagship program, and a rival intelligence service will absolutely test that reading. If a country reverses a signature technology on its next capital ship, one interpretation is confidence and flexibility, and another interpretation is difficulty. Both interpretations will be written up, both will be briefed. And there is a third read, the one I find most interesting. This episode reveals the relative speeds of the American system to anyone watching carefully. The directive moves in a day, the plan moves in 2 months, the steel moves in years. That is not tactical information. That is structural information about how fast one part of a system can move and how slowly another part must follow. And structural information is the kind that shapes a competitor's planning assumptions for a decade. Stage 5, the reversibility ledger. Last stage, and the one that keeps me cautious. A design reversal is cheap on paper and brutally expensive in steel. The Wall Street Journal built its coverage around cost, reporting that restoring the older technology would carry a heavy price. I am attributing that framing rather than inventing a number. And you should notice how few precise source totals exist in public on day one of a story like this. But cost is not one number. Cost lands somewhere, and where it lands is the political story. Does it land on the shipbuilder as absorbed risk? On the Navy's shipbuilding account, competing with submarines and destroyers? On the delivery date, paid in schedule rather than dollars? Or on the air wing, whose assumptions about future deck operations were built around one launch architecture? And here is the final property of the carrier reversal, the one that should keep every viewer calm. Reversals are themselves reversible. A plan ordered in August can be delivered in October, debated in November, priced in December, and quietly shelved. Direction of travel is not arrival. The durable measure is never the announcement. It is the funded path. Let me address the obvious objection, and let me make it as strong as I possibly can, because the strongest version of this objection is genuinely good. A skeptic says this: "Professor, you are building a framework on top of a headline. What actually happened is that a president told a service to write a study. Governments order studies constantly. Most studies produce a binder. The binder produces a briefing, the briefing produces a meeting, and the meeting produces nothing. There is no contract, there is no appropriation, there is no bent metal. The three carriers that exist are reported to be untouched, and the ship at the center of this is years from the point where the change would even have to be locked in. So you have taken a routine tasking, attached a name to it, and called it a signal. The most likely outcome is that the plan lands in October, the numbers come back unattractive, and the whole thing fades. In 6 months, nobody will remember this news cycle." That is a strong objection. I want you to sit with it, because a large share of defense news does exactly what it describes. Here is my rebuttal, and I am going to keep it grounded in the same sourced facts. First, the objection proves my frame rather than defeating it. The carrier reversal is not a claim that steam catapults are coming. It is a claim about the gap between the speed of a directive and the speed of a shipyard. If the plan lands in October and dies, that is the gap working exactly as described. The framework survives either outcome, which is the entire point of building it around the mechanism instead of around a guess. Second, tasking a plan is not nothing, even when the plan fails. It creates a decision record. It forces an organization to write down, in numbers it must defend, what the change would cost in money and in schedule. Those numbers then exist. They get cited in budget hearings, in industry briefings, and in the next argument about the ship after this one. A study that dies still leaves behind a priced baseline, and priced baselines have long afterlives. Third, the skeptic's own timeline argument has a hidden edge. Because CVN 81 is early enough that a change is still theoretically possible, this is precisely the window where such a change is cheapest. If you were going to attempt a launch system reversal at any point in the life of a carrier program, the design phase is when you would do it. The skeptic says it is too early to matter. I would say it is the only moment when it could matter at all. Fourth, and most simply, the reporting itself is the reason to take it seriously. When the Associated Press, Reuters, The Guardian, and the Wall Street Journal all move the same directive on the same day, and one of them takes care to distinguish the three existing ships from the future hull, that is not a rumor cycle. That is a documented instruction with a documented deadline. So the honest position is neither dismissal nor alarm. Something real was ordered. What it becomes is genuinely undetermined, and the determination happens in a place most people are not watching. Let me give you the checkable signals. Before I do, I want to be explicit, because it matters more on this story than most. What follows is commentary, and it does not predict specific outcomes. These are things you can verify for yourself, not things I am promising will happen. In the next 48 to 72 hours, watch these 5. 1. Watch for a written instrument. The White House publishes its presidential actions, including presidential memoranda, in a public index. Whether the direction reported on August 13th surfaces there as a formal signed document or remains a reported verbal instruction tells you how much institutional weight is behind it. Paper survives news cycles. Statements often do not. 2. Watch the Navy's own language. Listen for whether service officials describe this as a study, an assessment, an analysis of alternatives, or a design change. Those words are not interchangeable inside a program office. Each one carries a different level of commitment and a different funding implication. And the word chosen in the first week usually predicts the shape of the October document. 3. Watch the shipbuilder. A contract modification, a change order, or even a public statement about the feasibility of reintroducing steam into a hull designed around electrical launch would move this out of politics and into industry. Silence from the yard is also information. Yards tend to speak when money and schedule are genuinely in motion. 4. Watch whether the distinction holds. The Associated Press reported that the first 3 Ford-class ships are unaffected and placed the prospective change at CVN 81 and later hulls. If that boundary starts moving in subsequent reporting in either direction, that is the single most significant development available. If it holds, the scope is bounded. If it blurs, the story becomes something much larger. 5. Watch Congress, not the Pentagon. Carrier technology changes live or die in appropriations language and authorization report text. Watch for members with shipbuilding constituencies asking for cost and schedule estimates. And watch for any request that the 2-month plan be delivered to committees rather than only internally. That is the moment a preference starts becoming a funded path. One thing I would specifically not treat as a signal: commentary about whether steam is better than electromagnetic launch. That argument will fill the next 2 weeks, and it will resolve nothing, because the decision is not being made on that axis. So let me pull it together for you. On Thursday, August 13th, the President directed the Navy to produce a plan within 2 months for returning to steam catapults on future Ford-class carriers. 4 major outlets reported it the same day. The Associated Press preserved the distinction that matters most, which is that the first 3 ships of the class are reported to be unaffected, and that the prospective change lands at CVN 81, the future USS Doris Miller, and the hulls behind her. What you are watching is not a tear-out, it is the carrier reversal. An administration changed what it wants in the next carrier in a single day, and the shipyard that would have to redesign, reprice, test, and deliver that carrier cannot possibly move at that speed. The whole story lives inside that gap, which means you now know where to look and you know what to ignore. Ignore the argument about steam versus electricity. Ignore the language about ripping systems out of ships that are already built. Watch instead for 3 things in the October document: a feasible engineering baseline, a stated schedule impact, a funded contracting path. If all 3 appear, a real reversal has begun. If anyone is missing, what you saw this week was direction, not decision. And knowing the difference is the entire skill. If this was useful to you, subscribe.